The sprawling estate of Blackwood Manor, nestled deep within the verdant, rolling hills of Willow Creek, Massachusetts, was a paradox of grandeur and decay. Once a beacon of prosperity and a testament to old New England money, its imposing Gothic architecture now seemed to sag under the weight of time and neglect. Crumbling stone gargoyles leered from moss-covered turrets. Ivy clawed its way up cracked facades, and the vast, once manicured gardens had succumbed to a wild, untamed beauty. The air here, even on the sunniest of days, carried a faint, melancholy scent of damp earth and forgotten dreams, a stark reflection of the fading fortunes of the Thorne family. Its current owner, Mr. Elias Thorne, antagonist, Type B, was a man as imposing and unyielding as the manor itself, a shrewd, pragmatic businessman in his late 50s. His sharp features and cold, calculating eyes rarely softened. He saw Blackwood Manor not as a family legacy, but as a dwindling asset, its extensive grounds representing untapped potential for profit, rather than a sanctuary of natural beauty. His recent bout with a mysterious, debilitating illness had only sharpened his practical edges, stripping away any last vestiges of sentimentality. He had lost faith in modern medicine after the prolonged and ultimately futile battle against the illness that had claimed his beloved wife, a battle that had drained his resources and hardened his heart. Now, he faced his own slow, agonizing decline, convinced there was no remedy for his own rare affliction. Lost within the sprawling, unkempt beauty of the estate was Alara Vance, Blackwood Manor's gardener. At 28, Alara was a quiet, unassuming woman whose plain linen dresses and perpetually dirt-stained hands made her almost invisible amidst the opulence of the manor. Her hair, often escaping its loose braid, framed a face that was more earnest than beautiful, but her eyes, a remarkable shade of deep forest green, held a depth of knowledge and a gentle wisdom far beyond her years. Unlike the other staff, who often grumbled about the manor's decay, Alara saw not ruin, but a canvas of boundless potential. She was a self-taught botanist, her mind a vast, intricate library of flora and fauna. Every spare moment was spent poring over ancient texts on herbalism, meticulously categorizing rare medicinal plants, and deciphering obscure, centuries-old healing remedies. Her constant companion was a thick, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with elegant sketches of plants, complex chemical notations, and meticulous observations of their medicinal properties. Her deepest aspiration was to harness this knowledge, not for fame or fortune, but to alleviate suffering, to use nature's boundless pharmacy for the betterment of mankind. Yet, to Mr. Thorne and most of the manor's inhabitants, she was merely the gardener, a simple laborer, an eccentric figure who spent too much time talking to plants. One crisp, late autumn morning, as a biting chill settled over Willow Creek, Alara was making her rounds through the neglected, overgrown woods bordering the estate, her breath plumed in the frosty air, and her fingers, though toughened by years of working the soil, were stiff with cold. She was searching for a particular type of rare moss she believed might thrive in the shaded, damp undergrowth. Suddenly, a faint, distressed whimper cut through the silence. It was Bartholomew, Mr. Thorne's aging Irish setter, a regal, if somewhat aloof, animal that Mr. Thorne, in his austere way, cherished above almost any other living creature. Bartholomew had a reputation for wandering, but this sound was different. Alara pushed through a thicket of thorny brambles and gasped. The old dog was trapped beneath a fallen oak, its massive trunk pinning his hind leg. He whimpered again, a pathetic, pain-filled sound, his eyes wide with fear. A jagged branch had pierced his side, and a dark stain was spreading rapidly on his thick, russet fur. The sight of the animal's suffering stirred something fierce and immediate within Alara. Without a moment's hesitation, and certainly without stopping to consider calling Mr. Thorne or the local veterinarian, a process that would undoubtedly involve endless bureaucratic delays and the risk of the dog bleeding out, Alara sprang into action. Her movements were swift, decisive, almost instinctive. She first assessed the dog's injury, her keen eyes noting the depth of the wound and the alarming rate of blood loss. She immediately began to forage, her hands moving with practiced ease, pulling specific leaves and stems from the undergrowth. Wild comfrey for its natural hemostatic properties, willow bark for pain relief, and a handful of aromatic lavender for its calming effect. She quickly crushed the herbs between two smooth stones, mixing them with a few drops of water from her canteen to form a crude, but effective, poultice. With gentle, steady hands, she applied the paste directly to the wound, murmuring soothing words to the whimpering animal. She then used strips of linen from her foraging bag to improvise a tourniquet, meticulously wrapping it around Bartholomew's leg to staunch the bleeding. After stabilizing the immediate injury, she noticed the dog shivering uncontrollably, its strength rapidly waning. She quickly gathered fallen leaves and soft moss, creating a makeshift, insulated bed beneath the shelter of a sturdy pine. Then, with surprising strength for her slight frame, she carefully extricated the dog from beneath the fallen tree, easing his injured leg free. She lifted the surprisingly heavy animal into her arms, cradling him gently, and began the slow, arduous trek back to the manor, the injured dog whimpering softly against her chest. She arrived at the manor gate hours later, soaked, muddy, and exhausted, but with Bartholomew breathing more steadily in her arms. She spent the entire night by his side, administering small doses of her herbal concoction to alleviate his pain and continuously changing his makeshift bandages. By dawn, Bartholomew was still weak, but the bleeding had stopped. His breathing was even, and he was able to lift his head and lick her hand. This small, unheralded act of compassion and immediate, knowledgeable intervention, performed without thought of reward or recognition, ensured Bartholomew's survival, subtly showcasing Alara's inherent decency, quick thinking, and surprising competency in a crisis. Mr. Thorne, though outwardly composed, was quietly astonished by Alara's dedication and the dog's miraculous recovery, a tiny seed of respect silently planted within his hardened heart. Alara's world, while outwardly mundane, held subtle layers of mystery. She frequently received thick, cream-colored envelopes, marked with exotic postage stamps, from various botanical gardens and obscure research institutes around the globe. She would retreat to the solitude of her tiny, cluttered cottage, or sometimes to a secluded, overgrown corner of the vast manor grounds, to read them in private. Occasionally, she would murmur complex botanical names or discuss ancient, almost mystical, healing philosophies to herself, her voice a low, thoughtful hum. One afternoon, as Alara was meticulously tending to a small, hidden patch of rare, almost iridescent blue flowers, a secret garden she had cultivated behind an old, crumbling greenhouse, Mrs. Agnes, the helper, the manor's kind-hearted but perpetually busy housekeeper, happened upon her. Mrs. Agnes, known for her gentle curiosity, paused, watching Alara with a soft smile. She saw Alara carefully mixing what looked like a poultice from the vibrant blue flowers, and heard her quietly muse. This is the final variant. The ancient recipe speaks of such a bloom for the deepest fevers. Mrs. Agnes simply chuckled softly, accustomed to Alara's unique hobbies, dismissing it as a harmless, charming eccentricity. She saw a diligent gardener with an unusual passion for plants, utterly unaware that she was witnessing a glimpse into Alara's profound, almost prodigious talent for botany and traditional medicine. This brief, unheeded observation by Mrs. Agnes, though seemingly insignificant, subtly hinted at the extraordinary depth of Alara's knowledge and skill, creating a quiet yet compelling seed of a mystery that would later prove to be of paramount importance. The oppressive quiet of Blackwood Manor had, for generations, been a constant, almost comforting presence. Its ancient walls, thick with history and unspoken secrets, seemed to absorb sound, muffling the distant cries of wild birds and the whisper of the wind through the vast, untamed gardens. But in recent weeks, A new, disquieting silence had fallen over the estate. A tense, brittle hush that spoke not of peace, but of profound disquiet. It emanated from within the very heart of the manor, from the grand master bedroom where Mr. Elias Thorne antagonist type B lay confined. His mysterious illness, once a nagging inconvenience, had rapidly escalated into a terrifying, life-threatening crisis, casting a long, ominous shadow over every inhabitant of Willow Creek. The entire household staff moved with a new, somber reverence, their usual bustling activities muted by the unspoken dread that permeated the air. Even the gardeners, usually a boisterous crew, now spoke in hushed tones, their spades clanking softly against the earth as if fearing to disturb the fragile peace. For Ilara Vance, the shift was particularly unsettling. She had always found solace in the quiet solitude of the gardens, a world unto itself where nature's rhythms dictated her days. But now, the silence felt heavy, suffocating. She felt a profound sense of anxiety, a visceral dread that clawed at her insides. Mr. Thorne, for all his sternness and pragmatic distance, was the very pillar of Blackwood Manor. His potential demise threatened not only his own life, but the very existence of the estate she had come to love, the vast, neglected grounds that were her sanctuary and her endless source of botanical fascination. Whispers had begun to circulate among the staff, hushed and fearful, of the manor being sold off, its ancient trees felled, its rare flora uprooted, to settle the debts that would inevitably accrue upon his death. The thought of Blackwood Manor being despoiled, its natural beauty sacrificed to cold commerce, was a deeply personal affront to Ilara, striking at the very core of her being. The catalyst arrived on a particularly gloomy Tuesday morning, heralded by the hushed, urgent voices of the doctors and the increased frequency of Mr. Thorne's agonizing coughs. Ilara, trimming a rosebush near the drawing-room window, overheard fragments of a grave conversation, a rare autoimmune disorder, no known cure, prognosis grim. The words hung in the air like condemned decrees. Later that afternoon, the formidable Dr. Alistair Finch, the city's most esteemed physician, emerged from Mr. Thorne's room, his face drawn and weary. He spoke quietly to Mrs. Agnes, but his voice carried in the hushed manor halls. "We've done all we can, Mrs. Agnes. It's beyond our scope. He's deteriorating rapidly. I'm afraid. It's only a matter of time." The pronouncement was a death knell, echoing through the cavernous manor, extinguishing the last flicker of conventional hope. The news hit Ilara like a physical blow. The certainty of his impending death, the helplessness of modern medicine, ignited a fierce, almost desperate resolve within her. She spent the rest of the day in a frantic, almost obsessive study. Her small cottage, usually a model of organized botanical chaos, became a maelstrom of scattered books, handwritten notes, and half-empty cups of chamomile tea. She worked relentlessly, powered by an almost manic energy, driven by the urgency of the situation and a profound sense of responsibility. She revisited every medical journal, every ancient herbal text, every obscure treatise on rare diseases she possessed, cross-referencing symptoms, poring over detailed illustrations of microscopic cellular structures, comparing them to the detailed accounts of Mr. Thorne's worsening condition. She slept little, her mind a relentless engine of inquiry, fueled by the ticking clock of Mr. Thorne's failing health. It was in the dusty pages of an antique volume, a forgotten tome on Appalachian folk remedies, that she finally found it. The description was startlingly precise, outlining a series of symptoms eerily similar to Mr. Thorne's, a condition often misdiagnosed, exacerbated by specific environmental factors common in older, damp estates like Blackwood Manor. And alongside the description was a crude, faded illustration of a rare plant, an almost mythical herb, said to possess potent anti-inflammatory and regenerative properties. The plant, known only in ancient texts as Aura's Embrace, due to its almost ethereal glow, was believed to have vanished from the North American continent centuries ago. Its existence was widely dismissed as folklore by modern botanists. Yet, a memory, sharp and vivid, sparked in Alara's mind. After the ferocious autumn storm that had swept through Willow Creek weeks ago, uprooting ancient trees and scattering debris, Alara had been diligently assessing the damage in the neglected, wilder corners of Blackwood Manor's sprawling grounds, hidden beneath a tangle of fallen branches and forgotten brambles, tucked away in a damp, shaded hollow. She had stumbled upon a cluster of fragile saplings, almost camouflaged by their surroundings. Among them, barely distinguishable from the surrounding undergrowth, was a single, delicate seedling, unlike anything she had ever seen. Its leaves, a deep, velvety green, had an almost imperceptible, luminous sheen, particularly in the soft light of dawn. It was small, unassuming, and easily mistaken for common ground cover. But Alara, with her discerning eye, had felt an immediate, inexplicable pull towards it. She hadn't known its name then, but she had recognized its unique, almost otherworldly vitality. She had carefully nurtured it, shielding it from the elements, convinced it was something special, something profoundly important. This was the weed she had been scolded for planting, or rather, for allowing to flourish in a wild corner of the garden that Mr. Thorne had designated for a new, commercially viable pine grove. He had seen it as an obstacle, an unsightly nuisance in his carefully planned landscape. Alara had subtly, persistently, protected it, transplanting it to her secret garden behind the old greenhouse, nurturing its growth, driven by an instinct she couldn't explain. Now, holding the ancient text, comparing the faded illustration to the vivid memory of her thriving plant, a tremor ran through her. It was Aura's embrace, the key to Mr. Thorne's survival. It was a discovery that simultaneously filled her with an exhilarating surge of hope and a chilling wave of fear. This wasn't just a potential cure, it was a profound vindication of her unconventional knowledge, a testament to the power of overlooked wisdom. But it also meant stepping into the glaring spotlight, challenging the authority of renowned doctors, and confronting the rigid skepticism of Mr. Thorne himself. The thought of ridicule, of being dismissed as a superstitious gardener, of risking her beloved position at Blackwood Manor, sent a cold shiver down her spine. The stakes were impossibly high. Driven by this profound internal conflict, a desperate urgency to save Mr. Thorne, and a burgeoning sense of responsibility, Alara decided to test the waters. One quiet evening, after Mr. Thorne's condition had worsened significantly, she carefully transcribed the ancient recipe for Aura's embrace, along with a detailed explanation of its properties and how it correlated to Mr. Thorne's specific symptoms, onto a clean page of her botanical journal. She then deliberately left the journal open on Mrs. Agnes's The Helper antique writing desk, positioned strategically near a stack of medical bills that Mrs. Agnes would undoubtedly review. The page prominently displayed the vivid sketch of Aura's embrace, a plant Mrs. Agnes might vaguely remember from Alara's secret garden, along with the precise dosage and preparation instructions for the herbal decoction. Alara lingered nearby, pretending to dust a collection of porcelain figurines in the hallway, her heart pounding with anxious anticipation, straining to hear any reaction. Later that evening, Mrs. Agnes, her face etched with worry from a long day of tending to Mr. Thorne, finally sat down at her desk. She sighed, her eyes heavy, as she began to sort through the daunting stack of medical invoices. Her gaze drifted across the desk, landing on Alara's open journal. She paused, her brow furrowing slightly as she glanced at the intricate diagram of the plant and the complex, scientific-sounding notes written in Alara's elegant script. Her lips moved silently as she read a few lines. Rare immunomodulator, anti-inflammatory, cellular regeneration. She recognized the meticulousness, the dedication, but ultimately, Her mind was too consumed by the more immediate, overwhelming crisis of Mr. Thorne's deteriorating health. She gently closed the journal, placing it neatly to the side, then picked up a medical bill, sighing audibly. "Poor child," she murmured to herself, mistaking Alara's detailed research for a charming, but ultimately irrelevant, hobby. If only a plant could truly help him now. She sighed again, unaware of the profound irony of her words. A wave of profound disappointment washed over Alara. It was exactly as she had feared. Her most desperate, subtle plea had gone unheard. Her knowledge dismissed as mere fancy. She was invisible, her potential solution ignored. The closed journal on Mrs. Agnes's desk felt like a slammed door, a stark symbol of her own powerlessness. Over the next few days, Mr. Thorne's condition continued its agonizing decline. The air in Blackwood Manor grew heavier, thick with resignation. And then, a new, far more insidious threat began to emerge. Mr. Sterling Croft Antagonist Type A, a notorious and utterly unscrupulous rare plant collector from Boston, made his calculated entrance. He arrived under the guise of an old family friend, expressing deep concern for Mr. Thorne's health, bringing expensive, but ultimately useless, bouquets of hothouse flowers. Alara, with her keen observations, immediately recognized him for what he truly was, a predator. Croft's eyes, though outwardly sympathetic, constantly darted around the manor, assessing its value, lingering a little too long on the ancient trees in the arboretum, and once, to Alara's chilling alarm, even on the secluded patch where her precious aura's embrace was thriving. He whispered subtly to the household staff, asking detailed questions about the manor's finances, about Mr. Thorne's will, about the likely fate of the estate upon his demise. He began to suggest practical solutions for the inevitable transition, gently implying that Mr. Thorne's passing was a foregone conclusion. Alara also overheard him making discreet phone calls, his voice low and conspiratorial, discussing liquidation strategies and appraisals. One evening, as Alara watched Mr. Thorne struggling for breath, his life fading before her eyes, and observed Sterling Croft smoothly manipulating Mrs. Agnes with false promises of support for the staff after Thorne's death, a terrifying realization crystallized within her. This wasn't just about Mr. Thorne's life anymore. It was about Blackwood Manor, her home, her sanctuary, her botanical treasure trove. It was about the honest, loyal staff who would be cast out. It was about the very soul of the estate being sold to a greedy, soulless man like Croft. She understood now, with a chilling clarity, that Sterling Croft was not a friend, but a vulture, circling, waiting for the precise moment to strike. The realization ignited a fiery resolve within Alara. The fear of ridicule, the terror of public humiliation, the anxiety about losing her job, all of it began to recede, overshadowed by a more powerful, undeniable imperative. She could not, would not, stand by and watch this happen. She possessed the knowledge, the only potential solution, and it demanded to be used. The casual dismissal of her journal, Sterling Croft's blatant opportunism, Mr. Thorne's agonizing decline, all converged into a single, undeniable point of no return. She knew, with absolute certainty, that she could not return to her quiet life as an invisible gardener while the fate of Blackwood Manor and the life of its owner hung precariously in the balance. Her knowledge, her passion, her unique gift, demanded to be heard. The fight to save Blackwood Manor, and, implicitly, to carve out her own rightful place within the world of natural healing, had truly begun. She would confront them all. The Grand Master bedroom of Blackwood Manor, usually a sanctuary of quiet dignity, now felt like a stage set for a Greek tragedy. The heavy velvet curtains, drawn tight against the relentless downpour, plunged the room into a somber twilight, broken only by the anemic glow of a bedside lamp. The air hung thick and still, heavy with the metallic tang of illness and the unspoken presence of impending death. Mr. Elias Thorne, antagonist. Type B lay motionless in his vast four-poster bed, his gaunt face almost indistinguishable from the crisp white of his sheets. His breathing had become a faint, irregular fluttering, each shallow gasp a testament to the life slowly draining from him. His eyes, though closed, seemed sunken, retreating deeper into his skull. The city's top physicians, after countless visits and expensive consultations, had long since departed, their pronouncements of no hope echoing in the silent corridors. They had done all they could, they claimed, leaving Mr. Thorne to the inevitable. Sterling Croft, antagonist type A, ever the predator, sat by the bedside, a picture of false solicitude. He held one of Mr. Thorne's pallid hands, stroking it gently, his face etched with a performative sorrow. Yet his eyes, as always, betrayed him, darting constantly around the opulent room, assessing the antique furniture, the rare paintings, the very structure of the manor itself. His hushed words, ostensibly of comfort, were laced with thinly veiled hints about legal procedures, estate transitions, and the unfortunate necessity of preparing for the inevitable. He was already rehearsing his takeover, mentally calculating the profit margins of selling off this ancient, storied inheritance. His voice, usually smooth and unctuous, held a subtle undercurrent of barely contained triumph. He looked at Mr. Thorne not as a dying man, but as a closing deal. Standing in the corner, a huddle of loyal staff members, including Mrs. Agnes the helper, watched with profound grief etched on their faces. Mrs. Agnes, usually a pillar of strength, now looked fragile. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes red-rimmed from unshed tears. The other servants, their faces ashen, whispered prayers, their hands clasped tightly. They had served the Thorne family for decades, and the thought of their beloved manor falling into the hands of a cold, calculating man like Sterling Croft was a fresh agony atop their sorrow. The atmosphere was one of suffocating despair, a prelude to the final grim curtain. Suddenly, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through Mr. Thorne's emaciated body. His shallow breathing hitched, a guttural sound escaping his throat. A violent spasm seized him, his limbs jerking uncontrollably. His eyes, though closed, rolled back, and a thin, foamy spittle appeared at the corner of his mouth. It was a severe seizure, a terrifying escalation of his mysterious illness, confirming the doctor's dire predictions. The staff gasped, some turning away in horror. Sterling Croft, startled by the sudden violence of the seizure, quickly withdrew his hand, his feigned sympathy momentarily replaced by a flicker of revulsion. He saw this as the final, agonizing throes, the last desperate battle of a dying man. He stood up, adjusting his expensive suit, already composing the solemn pronouncements for the family lawyers. Outside the closed door, just a few feet away, Alara Vance heard the commotion, the strained cries of the staff, the sudden, sharp gasp, the unsettling sounds emanating from within the room. They pierced through the thick door, sending a cold shiver down her spine. She had just returned from her small, secluded cottage, having spent the night meticulously preparing the herbal decoction from the Aura's Embrace plant. A tiny glass vial now clutched tightly in her hand. The crisis was clearly escalating, reaching its terrifying crescendo. She knew, with absolute certainty, that this was the final, desperate window of opportunity. The doctors were gone. Modern medicine had failed, and Mr. Thorne was dying. Rapidly, without a moment's hesitation, propelled by a powerful surge of responsibility and a desperate, almost primal urge to act. Alara pushed the door open. She walked straight into the room, her eyes fixed on Mr. Thorne's convulsing form. Her presence, sudden and unexpected, caused a ripple of surprise among the grieving staff. She ignored them, ignored the opulent surroundings, ignored the very real fear that tightened her chest. Her focus was singular, absolute. She went directly to the bedside, her hand holding the small glass vial, her heart pounding a furious rhythm against her ribs. Her voice, though soft and surprisingly steady amidst the chaos, cut through the heavy silence of the room. "Mr. Thorne, please. I have something that might help. I believe it can." She had intended to say more, to explain, to offer a scientific rationale for her intervention. But before the words could fully form, Sterling Croft spun around, his eyes, which had been fixed on Mr. Thorne, now blazing with a sudden venomous fury as he recognized the young gardener. What are you doing in here?" Sterling shrieked, his voice raw with disbelief and outright rage, echoing sharply in the confined space. He lunged forward, his face contorted into a mask of pure indignation, his carefully constructed facade of sympathy cracking completely. "You're the gardener. What business do you have in Mr. Thorne's sick room? Get out. Get out of here before I have you arrested for trespassing, for interference." His voice rose with each word, culminating in a furious roar that filled the room, making some of the staff flinch. "You are merely a servant, a gardener. Do you think your herbs can cure what the finest doctors in Massachusetts could not?" His tone dripped with contempt, his words designed to humiliate, to utterly invalidate her presence and her potential. "This is not your place. Girl, away with you." Alara froze, her small frame rigid under the onslaught of his rage. Her face, which had been set with determination, drained of color, a hot flush of shame creeping up her neck. The vial in her hand felt impossibly heavy. His words, sharp and demeaning, sliced through her resolve, exposing her vulnerability, her low status. She felt the searing heat of his incandescent gaze, pinning her in place, the eyes of the staff, wide with shock and morbid curiosity, now fixed upon her. This was the crushing weight of public humiliation, the terrifying reality of her unwilling unveiling, where her profound, unconventional talent was exposed not through a heroic act, but through a desperate, clumsy whisper that invited scorn and contempt rather than recognition. She felt utterly exposed, her secret ambition laid bare and ridiculed for all to see. Mrs. Agnes, the helper, however, was a selective witness to this volatile exchange. While Sterling's bellowing words had indeed caught the attention of all the staff, it was Mrs. Agnes who observed the full, intricate dynamic. She saw not just the furious, demeaning anger in Sterling's eyes, but also the genuine, desperate conviction in Alara's. She remembered Alara's quiet dedication, her meticulous care for Bartholomew, the strange, complex diagrams in her botanical journal that she had so casually dismissed. Now, seeing Alara's unwavering stance, her profound focus on Mr. Thorne even under Sterling's relentless verbal assault, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to bloom in Mrs. Agnes's heart. She didn't fully understand it, but she sensed the profound earnestness, the desperate sincerity in Alara. She didn't intervene immediately, too stunned by Sterling's outburst and the sheer audacity of Alara's presence. But she watched, her gaze fixed, a flicker of professional interest and human empathy igniting within her. Sterling Croft, seeing Alara's momentary hesitation, pressed his advantage. He perceived her stillness as weakness, her silence as defeat. He needed to utterly crush her, to ensure she posed no further threat to his meticulously laid plans. In a calculated effort to solidify his authority and publicly disgrace Alara, he didn't just dismiss her, he twisted the knife deeper. "You heard me, you insolent girl. Get out this instant and take your weeds with you. Do you understand I will not have some common gardener interfering with serious medical matters? You are a disgrace to this household, a superstitious fool." He strode towards her, his hand raised, as if to physically push her out of the room. "And let this be a lesson to all of you," he announced, turning to the other bewildered staff members, his voice dripping with condescension. Only modern science, only established authority can address matters of this gravity. Any attempts at folk remedies or witchcraft will be met with immediate dismissal. Do I make myself clear?" He glared at each staff member, a silent threat embedded in his words. He was asserting his dominance, publicly dismantling Alara's credibility, and ensuring no one else dared to challenge his authority or his narrative. His actions were a clear manifestation of his ruthless ambition and deep-seated prejudices, showing his willingness to demean others to maintain his precarious position and expedite his takeover of Blackwood Manor. Alara, pushed to the brink, felt a maelstrom of emotions surge within her: shame, injustice, and a burning resentment at his blatant cruelty. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from a desperate, almost uncontrollable urge to prove him wrong. But amidst the turmoil, a tiny, defiant spark ignited in her chest. She looked at Mr. Thorne, his body still convulsing, his life slipping away. She looked at Sterling Croft, his face a sneering mask of greed and disdain. She looked at Mrs. Agnes, her eyes wide with a desperate, unspoken plea. She would not let this be the end. She would not allow Mr. Thorne to die, and Blackwood Manor to fall into the hands of a schemer like Sterling Croft, when she held the very key to his salvation. The raw injustice of the moment solidified her resolve. The battle for Mr. Thorne's life, and implicitly, for the soul of Blackwood Manor, had just begun, and Alara, the quiet, underestimated gardener, was now, irrevocably, at its very heart. The days that followed Alara's desperate, thwarted attempt to administer her herbal remedy were thick with a suffocating despair at Blackwood Manor. Mr. Elias Thorne, antagonist type B, had slipped deeper into his coma, his breathing barely perceptible, a shallow, rattling sound that was more ghost than breath. The grim pronouncements of the city's most eminent doctors echoed through the hushed halls. No hope. A matter of hours. Prepare for the inevitable. These words were music to the ears of Sterling Croft antagonist type A, who now moved through the manor with an almost predatory grace, his every step a calculated advance towards complete dominion. He had all but finished the legal paperwork. His lawyers poised to execute the transfer of Blackwood Manor's vast assets the moment Mr. Thorne drew his last breath. He spoke openly of modernizing the estate, a thinly veiled threat to raze parts of the beloved gardens, to sell off ancient tracts of land, to transform Blackwood Manor into a sterile, profitable enterprise devoid of its unique history and natural beauty. His smug confidence was a cruel counterpoint to the quiet agony of the loyal staff. For Alara Vance, the atmosphere was a heavy shroud, weighing down her spirit. Her previous attempt to intervene had been met with Sterling Croft's vicious public humiliation, stripping her of her professional dignity and leaving her feeling utterly isolated. The Aura's embrace plant, the rare medicinal herb she had so carefully nurtured, now felt like a heavy burden in her small cottage, a potent symbol of a potential cure that no one would believe. The medical textbooks she had pored over, the ancient herbal lore she had mastered, seemed utterly meaningless in the face of such pervasive skepticism. She walked through the gardens she loved, her heart aching, seeing the future destruction that Sterling Croft promised. The very thought of Blackwood Manor, her sanctuary, being desecrated by his greedy hands, filled her with a desperate urgency that transcended her lingering fear and humiliation. She was alone in her conviction, the solitary keeper of a secret that could save a life and a legacy. Every passing second of Mr. Thorne's shallow breathing was a relentless countdown, an unbearable pressure that tightened around her chest. Then came the night of the great Willow Creek storm. It began subtly, with a low, mournful howl of wind through the ancient oaks, a prelude to the tempest that would soon engulf the town. By midnight, the storm had escalated into a furious maelstrom. Lightning flashed in jagged streaks across the inky sky, illuminating the manor in stark, ghostly flashes. Thunder boomed, rattling the very foundations of the old house. The power grid, fragile and old, succumbed with a sudden, definitive flicker. plunging Blackwood Manor into an absolute, disorienting darkness. The only light now came from the frantic flashes of lightning and the occasional desperate beam of a flashlight carried by a panicked servant. All phone lines went dead, severed by falling trees and whipping power lines. Willow Creek was entirely cut off, isolated in the heart of the storm. It was during this terrifying blackout, amidst the chaos of the raging tempest, that Mr. Thorne's condition took a sudden, catastrophic turn. A violent, prolonged seizure gripped his already weakened body. His shallow gasps turned into desperate, rasping chokes, and his limbs thrashed violently against the bedsheets. The loyal staff, gathered in the master bedroom, cried out in alarm, helpless in the face of his agonizing decline. Mrs. Agnes, her face pale with terror, fumbled for a candle, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. The flickering light cast grotesque shadows on the walls, making Mr. Thorne's convulsions seem even more monstrous. Sterling Croft, who had been in the library meticulously reviewing legal documents by the light of a portable lamp, heard the renewed cries of distress. A cruel smile twisted his lips. This was it. The final act. He rose, extinguished his lamp, and stealthily made his way to Mr. Thorne's bedroom door. He found Mrs. Agnes and several other staff members huddled outside, their faces etched with horror. He's having another seizure. Oh, dear Lord, he's fading. Mrs. Agnes sobbed, trying to push the heavy oak door open, but it was stuck. Croft, feigning concern, moved past her. The poor man. He needs quiet. Absolute quiet for his final moments, he declared, his voice deceptively calm. With a sickening click, he produced a small, ornate key from his pocket, a key he had secretly taken from Mr. Thorne's desk weeks ago, and locked the door from the outside. There, no one disturbing him. Let him rest in peace, he said, his eyes glittering with cold satisfaction in the brief flash of lightning. He then pocketed the key, his face a mask of false piety. His true intention was clear to ensure no one, particularly Alara, could intervene. He wanted Mr. Thorne to die, and he wanted it now. Mr. Croft, what have you done? Mrs. Agnes cried, pounding on the locked door. You cannot. He needs help. But her pleas were swallowed by the storm's fury and Croft's chilling dismissal. He simply turned, his back to them, and retreated to the library, leaving the dying man trapped, alone, and defenseless. The sick room, now locked and isolated, became Alara's symbolic arena, the place where she had been dismissed, where modern medicine had conceded defeat, and where life and death now waged their final, brutal war. In the dim, claustrophobic space, illuminated only by the intermittent, terrifying flashes of lightning, the very air seemed to crackle with tension. Sterling Croft, in the drawing room below, sat amidst his ill-gotten gains, convinced of his imminent victory, mocking the futility of their efforts through the howling storm. Alara stood outside the locked door, her heart hammering against her ribs, the terrifying reality of Mr. Thorne's isolated struggle crashing down on her. She heard Mrs. Agnes's distraught pleas, the muffled sounds of Mr. Thorne's increasingly shallow breathing. There's no one else, Alara. Mrs. Agnes whispered, her voice raw with desperation, her eyes pleading with Alara in the fleeting light of a passing lantern. My dear child, is there truly no way? Alara looked at Mrs. Agnes, then at the sturdy, locked door, then out the window at the raging tempest. A cold dread settled in her stomach, quickly followed by a white-hot surge of defiance. She would not let Mr. Thorne die like this. She would not let Blackwood Manor fall to Sterling Croft. This was the moment. Her unique knowledge, her desperate courage, was all that stood between life and death, between preservation and destruction. She was entirely alone in this fight, the burden of immense responsibility resting solely on her slender shoulders. Time was not merely ticking. It was a furious, accelerating sprint towards an irreversible end. With a determined set to her jaw, Alara turned and bolted through the darkened halls, her bare feet slapping against the cold stone floors. She ran into the maelstrom of the storm, heading straight for her secluded garden behind the old, dilapidated greenhouse. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at her clothes, whipping her hair across her face. Rain lashed down, blinding her, chilling her to the bone. She stumbled over hidden roots and slick mud, but she pushed onward, her mind singularly focused on the precious plant. This was the true ultimate test, a desperate race against time and nature, a physical and intellectual gauntlet. She reached her secret garden, a small, sheltered oasis now being battered by the storm. In the chaotic flashes of lightning, she located the single, thriving Aura's embrace plant, its leaves shimmering faintly even in the darkness. She knelt, digging furiously with her bare hands, tearing at the tough, muddy earth. The soil, usually soft and pliable, was now a viscous, unyielding clay, clinging to her fingers. The wind tried to rip the plant from her grasp. The rain plastered it against her face, but she dug with the strength of desperation, ignoring the stinging cuts on her hands, the mud caked beneath her fingernails, the freezing cold seeping into her bones. Finally, with a guttural grunt, she wrenched the root ball free, clutching the precious plant to her chest as if it were her own heart. Then, scrambling back towards the manor, she faced another insurmountable obstacle, the locked sick-room door. She couldn't get in, but she remembered the old, brittle pane of glass in the upper section of the window. With renewed purpose, she found a large, jagged stone near the rose garden, a relic from an old stone wall, and, without a moment's hesitation, hurled it at the window. The sound of shattering glass, loud and violent, sliced through the storm's roar, echoing like a gunshot in the silent manor. Shards of glass rained down around her, some slicing her skin, but she barely registered the pain. She had created an opening. She scrambled through the jagged opening, tearing her clothes, her skin scraping against the broken glass. She landed awkwardly inside, gasping, her body aching, her hands bleeding. The flickering light from Mrs. Agnes's lantern, which had fallen to the floor but remained lit, cast a gruesome glow on Mr. Thorne. He was still convulsing, his breathing a shallow, desperate gasp. "Ilara, you did it, Mrs. Agnes cried, her voice choked with shock and a fragile hope. Ilara ignored her. Her hands, though shaking violently from cold exhaustion and adrenaline, moved with urgent purpose. She pulled out her small, battered mortar and pestle from her pocket, along with a tiny vial of pure spring water. She crushed the Aura's embrace leaves, a deep emerald paste forming under her skillful fingers. The earthy scent of the herb, strangely comforting amidst the chaos, filled the room. She worked with astonishing speed and precision, her mind a focused beam of light in the swirling darkness. The cut on her wrist throbbed, but she felt nothing but the rhythmic pounding of her heart and the desperate urgency of her task. She poured the potent green liquid into a spoon, her eyes fixed on Mr. Thorne's contorted face. This was the moment, the final, desperate gamble. She leaned over him, her own face inches from his, and gently, carefully, forced the herbal solution past his clenched teeth, coaxing him to swallow. Each drop felt like a lifetime. Suddenly, the heavy sick-room door burst open, splintering at the frame. Sterling Croft stood there, his face livid with a murderous rage. He had heard the crashing glass, the commotion, and had finally managed to force the lock. His face contorted into a snarl of pure hatred. "What in God's name are you doing? You infernal girl. You've destroyed the room, you'll kill him. Get away from him." He lunged forward, his hands outstretched, intending to grab Ilara and rip her away from Mr. Thorne. He saw her action not as an act of salvation, but as deliberate sabotage, a defiant act against his authority and his imminent triumph. But Mrs. Agnes with a strength born of pure desperation and loyalty, threw herself between Sterling and Alara, her arms spread wide, blocking his path. "You shan't touch her. Mr. Croft, she is saving him. You left him to die." Her voice, though trembling, was infused with a fierce protectiveness. Alara, oblivious to the furious struggle behind her, continued her work. She held Mr. Thorne's hand, feeling for a pulse, watching his chest for any sign of improvement. The room was now filled with the violent struggle between Sterling and Mrs. Agnes, the relentless hammering of the storm, and the sickeningly shallow breaths of Mr. Thorne. It was a chaotic symphony of life and death, of hope and despair. Alara, the quiet gardener, stood at its heart, battling alone, armed only with her knowledge and her unwavering belief. The seconds stretched into an eternity, each one a silent prayer, a desperate plea for a miracle. The grand master bedroom of Blackwood Manor was a maelstrom of desperate struggle and desperate hope, intensified by the raging tempest outside. The relentless howl of the wind and the percussive drum of rain against the shattered window panes created a chaotic symphony, a fitting backdrop for the life and death drama unfolding within. Mr. Elias Thorne, antagonist type B, lay on the vast, four-poster bed, his emaciated body still locked in a violent, rattling seizure. Each strained breath was a testament to his fading life force, his face a ghastly shade of blue-tinged white. The room, plunged into semi-darkness by the power outage, was illuminated only by the frantic flashes of lightning that periodically cast eerie, dancing shadows across the walls, and the desperate, flickering glow of Mrs. Agnes's the helper dropped lantern, which miraculously remained lit on the floor, casting a small, tremulous circle of light. Alara Vance knelt by Mr. Thorne's bedside, her own body aching from her perilous entry through the window. Mud stained her clothes and streaked her face, and a fresh cut on her forearm oozed a thin line of blood, but she was oblivious to her discomfort. Her focus was absolute, an almost supernatural concentration that honed in solely on the task at hand. Her hands, though trembling slightly from the cold and exertion, moved with a practiced, almost surgical precision as she prepared the Aura's Embrace concoction. The emerald green paste, vibrant even in the dim light, emitted a faint, earthy aroma that cut through the sterile tang of illness. She worked quickly, crushing the leaves with her small, well-worn mortar and pestle, adding drops of pure spring water, her every movement purposeful, driven by an almost sacred sense of duty. Behind her, near the splintered doorway, a furious battle of wills raged. Sterling Croft, antagonist type A, his face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, struggled violently against Mrs. Agnes. He had finally managed to force the locked door open, his previous smug confidence replaced by a murderous fury at the sight of Alara's defiance and the potential unraveling of his meticulous plans. "Get out of my way, you old fool," he snarled, trying to shove Mrs. Agnes aside. His expensive suit was disheveled, his silver hair askew, revealing the raw, ugly greed beneath his polished exterior. He lunged forward, aiming to seize Alara, to physically tear her away from Mr. Thorne, convinced she was either a madwoman or a saboteur. But Mrs. Agnes, fueled by an unwavering loyalty to Mr. Thorne and a burgeoning, desperate hope in Alara, met his force with a surprising, almost formidable strength. Her slight frame, usually so demure, now felt like an immovable barrier. "You will not lay a hand on her, Mr. Croft. She is trying to save him. You abandoned him," she cried, her voice trembling but firm, her eyes blazing with an uncharacteristic fierceness. She braced herself against the doorframe, using her body as a shield, creating precious seconds for Alara. Alara ignored the chaos, the shouted threats, the violent struggle behind her. The world had narrowed to the precise moment, to the frail, dying man before her. She had finished preparing the potent liquid, pouring a small amount into a silver spoon she'd retrieved from her pocket. Mr. Thorn's convulsions were worsening, his breath a mere whisper, his eyes rolling back in his head. This was it. The final, agonizing seconds. The culmination of her entire journey. Her unshakable belief in forgotten wisdom. Her desperate gamble against overwhelming odds. With a deep, shuddering breath, Ilara leaned over Mr. Thorn, her face inches from his. His skin was cold and clammy to the touch. Her hand, though steady now, trembled with the sheer weight of responsibility. She gently tilted his head, meticulously, carefully parting his dry, cracked lips. He was completely unresponsive, a mere vessel. She knew if she failed, she would be branded a fraud, a charlatan, and Mr. Thorn would die. If she succeeded, it would be a miracle. Slowly, deliberately, she pressed the spoon to his mouth. A wave of profound anxiety washed over her, chilling her to the bone. Every fiber of her being screamed with the tension of the moment. 1 drop, 2 drops. She forced the bitter, earthy liquid past his clenched teeth, coaxing him to swallow. The act felt impossibly drawn out, suspended in time, each millisecond stretching into an eternity. The room was plunged into an almost unbearable, agonizing silence. Even the storm outside seemed to hold its breath for a fleeting moment. Sterling Croft, momentarily distracted by Ilara's strange, ritualistic movements, had paused his struggle with Mrs. Agnes. His eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and morbid curiosity. Watching the scene unfold, all eyes were on Ilara, on Mr. Thorn, waiting. Nothing. Mr. Thorn remained motionless, his chest still, his breath vanished. The spoon clattered softly against the bedside table as it slipped from Ilara's nerveless fingers. Her heart sank, a leaden weight in her chest. Had it been a mistake? Had her fervent belief, her lifelong study, been nothing but a foolish dream? The crushing weight of failure descended upon her, cold and absolute. A wave of profound despair washed over her, turning her vision blurry. She looked at Mr. Thorn's still, unresponsive face, a silent scream building in her throat. Her eyes welled with tears, reflecting the desperate, fleeting flashes of lightning. Sterling Croft, seeing the lack of immediate reaction, burst into a harsh, triumphant laugh, a cruel, mocking sound that sliced through the tense silence. "See, Agnes, I told you, a charlatan, a fool. He's gone. Your little gardener has done nothing but poison him." He gestured wildly at Ilara, his face alight with a vicious glee. "Now, get out of my way. This charade is over." He lunged past Mrs. Agnes, his hand outstretched to grab Ilara, to expose her perceived failure, to finally complete his grotesque takeover. But just as his fingers brushed her shoulder, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through Mr. Thorn's body. It was a ripple, a subtle vibration that seemed to emanate from deep within him. Then, a low, guttural cough, a rough, wet sound, escaped his lips. His chest, which had been utterly still, gave a sudden, convulsive heave, drawing in a deep, ragged breath. The sound was harsh, raw, but undeniably life. Ilara gasped, a choked sob of pure, overwhelming relief. Her tears, previously of despair, now streamed down her face, hot and sudden, tears of miraculous hope. She pressed her ear to Mr. Thorn's chest, her heart pounding in unison with his. A faint but steady rhythm pulsed beneath her ear. His heartbeat, though still weak, was undeniably stronger, more regular. The blue tinge on his face began to recede, replaced by a faint, almost miraculous flush of healthy color. "He's breathing, oh, he's breathing," Ilara whispered, her voice choked with emotion, a mix of disbelief and profound gratitude. She reached for the spoon, quickly administering a few more drops of the precious herbal solution, her hands moving with renewed confidence. As if roused from a long, terrifying nightmare, Mr. Thorn groaned again, a deeper, more resonant sound this time. His eyelids, which had been stubbornly shut for days, fluttered. Slowly, painfully, they began to lift, revealing eyes that, though still clouded with weakness, held a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of consciousness. He moved his head infinitesimally, a subtle shift, and his gaze, though unfocused, seemed to find Alara's. His lips parted, and a raspy, almost inaudible whisper escaped him. The gardener, he breathed, his voice raw with disuse and profound weakness, but undeniably articulate. In that single, whispered phrase, delivered by a man just moments from death, lay an acknowledgment that transcended his former contempt, a silent testimony to her unforeseen triumph. Sterling Croft stood frozen, his hand still extended towards Alara, his face a ghastly shade of ashen white. His jaw hung slack, his eyes wide, bulging with utter dumbfounded shock. The triumphant sneer that had been so firmly etched on his features melted away, replaced by a look of grotesque disbelief, then dawning horror. "Impossible," he choked out, his voice a barely audible whisper, devoid of its usual arrogant bluster. It's impossible." He stared at Mr. Thorn, who was now stirring, then at the shattered window, then at the innocent-looking weed on the table, as if trying to reconcile the impossible reality before him. His meticulously crafted plan, his impending victory, had been snatched away from him by the very person he had so cruelly dismissed, with the very plant he had scorned as a worthless nuisance. The air left his lungs in a silent whoosh, his shoulders slumping in utter defeat. Mrs. Agnes, her face streaked with tears and joy, stumbled forward and enveloped Alara in a tight, shaking embrace. "You did it, child. You saved him. You saved him," she sobbed, her voice a chorus of praise and profound relief. The other staff members, who had witnessed the entire miraculous turnaround, erupted in hushed murmurs of awe and wonder. Their faces, once etched with sorrow and despair, now shone with a radiant mixture of bewildered hope, dawning admiration, and sheer, overwhelming relief. They moved closer, a spontaneous circle forming around Alara, their whispers of "a miracle" and "the gardener" filling the room, acknowledging her victory, not just over Mr. Thorn's illness, but over the very skepticism that had once surrounded her. The silent, powerful vindication of Alara Vance had begun. The fury of the great Willow Creek storm began to subside with the dawn, leaving behind a world washed clean, glistening under a hesitant sun. Inside Blackwood Manor, a new, fragile calm had settled, palpable after the night's tempestuous ordeal. The shattered window in Mr. Elias Thorne's antagonist Type B bedroom stood as a silent testament to the desperate battle for his life, now thankfully won. Mr. Thorne lay still, but his breathing was steady and deep, the blue tinge entirely gone from his face. His eyelids, though still heavy with the lingering effects of his illness, occasionally fluttered, and a faint flush of healthy color had returned to his cheeks. The air, no longer thick with the scent of antiseptic and despair, carried the faint, earthy aroma of the potent herbal concoction that had pulled him back from the brink. Alara Vance, her face still streaked with mud and tears, felt a profound exhaustion settle over her, both physical and emotional. Yet, beneath the weariness, a quiet elation bloomed. She had done it. She had saved him. She sat on a small stool beside Mr. Thorne's bed, gently wiping his brow with a cool cloth, her gaze soft with relief and a protective tenderness. Her hands, though still aching from the cuts and scrapes, moved with a newfound confidence. Mrs. Agnes, the helper, her initial shock having given way to overwhelming relief and admiration, bustled around the room, bringing fresh linens and a steaming mug of herbal tea for Alara. Her eyes, though still red-rimmed, sparkled with joyous tears. "A true miracle," Ilara, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, placing a comforting hand on Ilara's shoulder. I never would have believed it, had I not seen it with my own eyes. You saved him, child. You truly did. The other loyal staff members, cautiously entering the room now that the immediate crisis had passed, stood in hushed awe. Their whispers were no longer of despair, but of wonder and burgeoning respect. They looked at Ilara, no longer as the quiet, eccentric gardener, but as something akin to a healer, a savior. The change in their demeanor was immediate and profound, a collective shift from dismissal to quiet reverence. They offered silent nods of respect, their eyes conveying a wordless apology for their previous skepticism. Meanwhile, the unraveling of Sterling Croft antagonist Type A had begun. His initial dumbfounded shock had quickly mutated into a desperate, pathetic fury. He had immediately called his lawyers, attempting to push through the final paperwork for Blackwood Manor. But the lines were still down due to the storm. When he returned to Mr. Thorne's bedroom, intending to somehow dismiss Ilara's lucky fluke and regain control, he was met with a stark reality. Mr. Thorne, though weak, was now fully conscious, his eyes clear and resolute. The first thing Mr. Thorne did, his voice still hoarse but surprisingly strong, was to fix Sterling Croft with a gaze of chilling clarity. "Mr. Croft," he rasped, "I believe we have some rather urgent matters to discuss. Starting with why you locked me in this room." Sterling Croft, caught entirely off guard by Thorne's unexpected recovery and lucid state, stammered, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. He tried to offer flimsy excuses, blaming the storm, claiming it was for Thorne's protection, but his words lacked conviction, his eyes darting nervously. His entire scheme, laid bare by Ilara's intervention, was crumbling around him. Mr. Thorne, though still weak, possessed a sharp, incisive mind. He listened to Sterling's stammering excuses, his eyes narrowing. He then instructed Mrs. Agnes to retrieve a small, hidden dictaphone from his bedside drawer, a device he had often used for confidential business notes. "Mr. Croft," Thorne stated, his voice gaining strength with each word, "I believe your phone calls about liquidation strategies and appraisals were not for my benefit, and I believe I have quite a bit of recorded evidence to support that assertion." He played a brief, chilling snippet of Sterling Croft's voice, captured accidentally by the dictaphone, discussing the sale of the manor's ancient arboretum to a logging company. The incriminating recording, combined with Mrs. Agnes's eyewitness account of Sterling locking the door and Ilara's miraculous intervention, sealed Croft's fate. The retribution for Sterling Croft was swift and absolute, proportionate to his avarice and deceit. Once the storm subsided and communications were restored, Mr. Thorne immediately contacted his own legal team, who descended upon Blackwood Manor like a vengeful storm. Sterling Croft was summarily dismissed from the premises, not just from the manor, but from the prestigious horticultural society he had used as a front for his dubious dealings. He faced immediate legal action for attempted fraud and wrongful interference, the evidence against him irrefutable. His reputation, once formidable in the world of rare plant collection, was utterly annihilated. His vast collection of exotic plants, acquired often through questionable means, was seized, and he found himself facing crippling lawsuits and the very real prospect of a lengthy prison sentence. He lost everything: his fortune, his reputation, his freedom, a complete and devastating collapse. His final image as he was escorted away by local deputies was one of a disheveled, broken man, his face a picture of utter despair, stripped of all the arrogance that had defined him. For Mr. Elias Thorne, his recovery was slow but steady. The aura's embrace continued to work its quiet magic, rejuvenating his system. And with his physical recovery came a profound internal shift. The near-death experience, coupled with Ilara's unexpected intervention, had irrevocably altered his perspective. The cold, pragmatic businessman who had valued only profit now saw the invaluable worth of kindness, unconventional wisdom, and the inherent beauty of nature. He looked at Alara, no longer as the gardener, but as his savior, and increasingly as an indispensable partner. A week after the storm, Mr. Thorne, still frail but lucid, called Alara to his study. The room, usually reserved for somber business dealings, now felt lighter, infused with a new sense of purpose. "Alara," he began, his voice soft, almost hesitant, a stark contrast to his usual authoritative tone. "I owe you my life, and I owe you an apology. I misjudged you, severely. Your dedication, your knowledge, it is truly extraordinary." He paused, a flicker of genuine remorse in his eyes. "I saw only weeds where you saw medicine. I saw only land where you saw life. And for that, I am truly sorry." He then offered her a new, unprecedented opportunity. "Blackwood Manor needs more than just a gardener, Alara. It needs a steward, someone who understands its true value. I want you to be the head botanist and estate manager. You will have full authority over the gardens, the grounds, and a substantial budget for research. I want you to transform Blackwood Manor into a leading center for botanical research, a place where rare plants, like the one that saved my life, can be studied, cultivated, and used for the benefit of others. It would be a new legacy for the Thorne family, one of healing and knowledge, rather than mere wealth." This was far more than a mere promotion. It was a complete validation of her life's work, a profound recognition of her talent and passion. It wasn't just financial security. It was the opportunity to fully realize her dreams, to establish a pioneering botanical institute, to pursue her passion for natural medicine on a grand scale. It was a chance to give back, to share her knowledge, to make a real difference in the world. Later that afternoon, as the setting sun cast long, golden shadows across the now calm gardens, Alara and Mrs. Me Agnes sat together on a weathered stone bench, sipping tea. The air was fresh, filled with the clean scent of rain-washed earth and the promise of new growth. Mrs. Agnes smiled, her eyes twinkling. "You truly turned the tide, child. Who would have thought a little weed could bring down a man like Croft and raise up someone like you?" Alara smiled back, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her face. "It was never just a weed, Mrs. Agnes," she replied softly, gazing at the lush greenery around them. "It was life, and sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight, just waiting for someone to see their true potential." Their shared glance was one of deep understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had both witnessed, and the profound changes it had brought. The new calm that settled over Blackwood Manor was not merely the aftermath of a storm, but the dawn of a transformed future. Months unfolded like the slow, graceful bloom of a rare flower at Blackwood Manor. The scars of the storm, both physical and emotional, gradually faded, replaced by a vibrant hum of renewed purpose and a palpable sense of hope. The manor itself seemed to breathe easier, its ancient stones absorbing the positive energy that now permeated its grand halls. Mr. Elias Thorne, antagonist type B, once confined to his sickbed, was now a man transformed. His gauntness had given way to a healthier robustness. His eyes, once cold and calculating, now held a warmth and a contemplative depth previously unseen. He moved with a newfound vitality, his steps firmer, his mind sharper than ever, but tempered by the profound humility of his near-death experience. The once stern pragmatist now spoke of the intricate balance of nature, of the wisdom inherent in overlooked remedies, and of the transformative power of genuine human connection. His recovery was nothing short of miraculous, a living testament to Alara Vance's extraordinary gift. Alara, now formally designated as the head botanist and estate manager, moved through Blackwood Manor with a quiet authority that belied her unassuming demeanor. Her plain linen dresses were still her uniform, her hands still perpetually stained with earth, but her presence commanded a new respect. The title, however, was merely a formality. her true work was already blossoming. The sprawling, neglected gardens, once a symbol of decaying grandeur, were being meticulously revitalized under her visionary guidance. She oversaw a small, dedicated team of new gardeners and groundskeepers, teaching them the delicate art of sustainable cultivation and the profound secrets of native flora. The air often hummed with their quiet chatter, the rhythmic thud of spades, and the gentle rustle of leaves as they worked alongside her. Her most significant undertaking was the establishment of the Blackwood Botanical Institute for Integrative Medicine, a name Mr. Thorne himself had insisted upon, a direct homage to the aura's embrace that had saved him. A section of the sprawling manor, including the old crumbling greenhouse and a previously unused wing of guest rooms, was now undergoing extensive renovations. Architects and builders, once tasked with preparing the estate for liquidation, now worked diligently to create state-of-the-art laboratories, climate-controlled greenhouses, and a dedicated research library filled with rare botanical texts, many of which Ilara herself had helped acquire from hidden collections around the world. Mr. Thorne, with his formidable business acumen, spearheaded the funding efforts, leveraging his extensive network, no longer for personal gain, but for the greater good of this pioneering institute. He spoke passionately about the need to bridge the gap between conventional medicine and natural healing, a stark contrast to his former staunch adherence to only traditional, Western medical practices. Ilara, now with access to unparalleled resources, fully immersed herself in her research. The aura's embrace plant, once a solitary, secretly nurtured seedling, was now thriving in a specialized, secure greenhouse, its luminous leaves carefully propagated. Ilara began a meticulous study of its unique cellular structure, its chemical compounds, and its optimal growing conditions. She was developing standardized protocols for its extraction and preparation, meticulously documenting every step. Her days were a whirlwind of scientific inquiry, practical application, and educational outreach. She lectured to visiting botanists and medical researchers, her soft voice gaining strength and clarity as she spoke passionately about the plant's properties and the potential of integrative medicine. Her formerly eccentric hobbies were now celebrated as groundbreaking science. One brisk afternoon, a distinguished group of visiting scholars from a renowned university in Cambridge, Massachusetts, was touring the burgeoning institute. Among them was Dr. Julian Thorne, Mr. Elias Thorne's estranged nephew. Dr. Thorne was a brilliant, but intensely skeptical, microbiologist, a product of rigorous, purely conventional scientific training. He had heard the incredible stories of his uncle's miraculous recovery and the gardener's cure, but he had dismissed them as anecdotal, lacking empirical evidence. He believed only in double-blind studies, peer-reviewed journals, and irrefutable data. His presence was a subtle challenge, a silent test of the Institute's credibility. As Ilara led them through the meticulously organized labs, explaining the complex chemical analyses they were performing on aura's embrace, Dr. Thorne maintained a polite but distant demeanor, his brow often furrowed in skepticism. He asked pointed, analytical questions, testing her knowledge, probing for any scientific weaknesses in her claims. His questions were not aggressive, but subtly dismissive, implying that while interesting, her work was unproven. He was a perfect example of the established scientific community's resistance to unconventional approaches. Finally, they entered the specialized greenhouse where the aura's embrace plants thrived, their delicate leaves shimmering faintly under the controlled lights. Ilara explained its unique properties, its growth cycle, and its historical use in ancient texts. Dr. Thorne listened, arms crossed, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. "Fascinating, Miss Vance," he finally stated, his tone carefully neutral, yet tinged with a faint condescension. "But anecdotal evidence and historical folklore, while charming, do not constitute scientific proof. Where is the data? The clinical trials, the peer review?" He waved a dismissive hand towards the plants. "This is a beautiful garden, yes, but it is not medicine." Ilara met his gaze, her green eyes steady and unwavering. She understood his skepticism. It was born of a scientific rigor she herself respected, but she also knew the profound truth of what she had witnessed. Instead of debating, she simply turned to Mr. Thorne, who had quietly joined the group. "Mr. Thorne," she said softly, "perhaps you would be so kind as to share your own experience." Mr. Thorne, seeing the implicit challenge in his nephew's eyes, stepped forward. He spoke calmly, methodically, detailing his illness, the failure of conventional treatments, the doctor's death pronouncements. He then described the night of the storm, his agonizing seizure, and Alara's desperate last-minute intervention. He spoke of the immediate shift he felt, the almost instantaneous reversal of his symptoms, the rapid, undeniable return of his strength. His voice was not theatrical, but simply factual, the testimony of a man who had stared death in the face and been pulled back by an unexpected hand. "My nephew, Dr. Thorne," he concluded, his gaze firm. "I am a living, breathing testament to Miss Vance's profound knowledge. The plant you dismiss as a beautiful garden saved my life when your proven science had given up." Dr. Thorne's meticulously constructed scientific composure began to crack. He looked at his uncle, vibrant and lucid, a stark contrast to the deathly figure he had visited just weeks prior. He looked at Alara, her unassuming but confident stance. The living proof stood before him. His skepticism, though deeply ingrained, wavered in the face of such undeniable, direct evidence. A flicker of genuine curiosity, perhaps even a hint of awe, replaced his usual dismissive air. He hadn't expected to be confronted with such an unassailable personal testimony. I see," Dr. Thorne murmured, his voice softer, less certain than before. He paused, then looked directly at Alara. "Miss Vance," he said, a new note of professional interest entering his voice. "Perhaps we could discuss your research protocols in more detail. I confess, I am intrigued." It was not a full conversion, but it was a crucial turning point, a crack in the wall of conventional scientific thought, acknowledging the potential for a paradigm shift. News of Mr. Thorne's miraculous recovery and the burgeoning Blackwood Botanical Institute began to ripple beyond Willow Creek, reaching the ears of a prominent investigative journalist from a major national publication, the Boston Globe. This journalist, known for uncovering hidden truths and challenging established narratives, saw a compelling human interest story that also contained the tantalizing possibility of exposing a groundbreaking medical discovery. The journalist arrived at Blackwood Manor unannounced. A few weeks later, she was initially skeptical, expecting a sensationalized tale of folk medicine. However, she was met not with mysticism, but with rigorous scientific inquiry and undeniable results. Alara, no longer shrinking from the spotlight, presented her research with clarity and confidence, offering meticulous data on Aura's embrace, explaining her cultivation methods, and detailing the physiological impact on Mr. Thorne. Mrs. Agnes offered her emotional eyewitness account of the dramatic recovery, emphasizing the profound change in Mr. Thorne and the contrast with Sterling Croft's cynical behavior. Mr. Thorne himself provided a powerful, eloquent testimony of his personal journey, detailing his illness, the failure of modern medicine, and his miraculous recovery due to Alara's intervention. He also revealed the extent of Sterling Croft's treachery, providing copies of the legal documents and a transcript of the damning recording, transforming the story from a simple medical miracle into a compelling narrative of good versus greed, of overlooked wisdom versus arrogant dismissal. The journalist, initially impartial, found herself increasingly captivated, her skepticism slowly melting away in the face of such compelling evidence and heartfelt testimony. She saw not just a cure, but a story of vindication, of a quiet, overlooked talent, proving its undeniable worth against overwhelming odds. The article, when it was finally published, was a powerful multi-page exposé, featuring glowing portraits of Alara and Mr. Thorne, vivid descriptions of the Blackwood Botanical Institute, and a damning account of Sterling Croft's downfall. It lauded Alara as a visionary botanist, transforming her from an unsung local gardener into a national figure, a symbol of innovative, holistic healing. The weed had become the cure, the outcast gardener, the revered scientist. And Blackwood Manor, once a dying relic, was now a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of seeing potential where others saw only neglect. The seeds of a new legacy had indeed taken root, promising a future of profound and positive change. The transformation of Blackwood Manor was profound, touching every corner of the venerable estate. What had once been a symbol of faded grandeur and quiet decline now hummed with a vibrant, dynamic energy. The renovations of the new Blackwood Botanical Institute for Integrative Medicine were completed with remarkable speed. Thanks to Mr. Elias Thorne's antagonist, Type B unwavering commitment and substantial financial backing, the previously unused wing of the manor, once cloaked in dust sheets and silence, now gleamed with state-of-the-art laboratories, climate-controlled greenhouses, and a magnificent research library. The air, once heavy with the scent of damp earth and old paper, now carried the clean, sterile notes of scientific equipment mingled with the sweet, herbaceous aroma of living plants. Alara Vance, now the undisputed head botanist and estate manager, moved through this revitalized space with a natural ease, her every step purposeful. The plain linen dresses remained her signature, a subtle defiance of the formal academic world she now inhabited, but they were often adorned with a lab coat, its pockets bulging with various tools and notebooks. Her hands, still deeply connected to the soil, were equally adept at manipulating delicate scientific instruments. Her days were a whirlwind of activity supervising research projects, overseeing the cultivation of new plant species, preparing lectures for visiting scholars, and, always, dedicating time to the meticulous study of Aura's embrace. The plant, once her hidden secret, was now the cornerstone of the Institute's pioneering research, thriving under optimal conditions in its dedicated greenhouse, its leaves indeed shimmering with an almost ethereal glow. The initial research findings were nothing short of groundbreaking. Alara's team, a small but dedicated group of young botanists and biochemists drawn by the Institute's innovative approach, had successfully isolated several key compounds within Aura's embrace. Early in vitro studies showed remarkable anti-inflammatory and cellular regenerative properties, far exceeding their most optimistic projections. They meticulously documented every step, transforming Alara's intuitive, ancient knowledge into verifiable, reproducible scientific data. The preliminary reports, circulated within a discreet network of progressive medical researchers, generated a buzz of cautious excitement. Mr. Thorne, now fully recovered and radiating a vigor that belied his recent near-death experience, had become Alara's most ardent champion and an indispensable partner in the Institute's growth. He had repurposed his formidable business acumen from the pursuit of profit to the advancement of knowledge and healing. He tirelessly fundraised, networking with philanthropists and major research foundations, painting a compelling picture of a new frontier in medicine. He spoke with genuine passion about the potential of integrative healing, often citing his own miraculous recovery as irrefutable proof. His conversion from a skeptical pragmatist to a fervent believer was a powerful narrative that opened many doors for the Institute. He handled the administrative complexities, allowing Alara to fully immerse herself in the scientific work. Their relationship, initially one of employer and employee, had deepened into a unique partnership built on mutual respect and a shared vision. He was the sturdy oak, providing the framework and protection, while she was the vibrant vine, reaching for new heights of discovery. The success, however, inevitably brought new challenges. The published article in the Boston Globe, while laudatory, had cast a bright spotlight on Blackwood Manor, drawing not only positive attention but also the inevitable skepticism and, in some cases, outright hostility from established medical and pharmaceutical industries. Dr. Julian Thorne, Mr. Elias Thorne's nephew and the skeptical microbiologist, emerged as a central figure in this unfolding drama. After his initial visit and the undeniable evidence of his uncle's recovery, He had returned to Blackwood Manor several times, his initial skepticism slowly eroding, replaced by a grudging respect and, eventually, a genuine scientific curiosity. He was a man of data and empirical evidence, and Alara's meticulous research, combined with his uncle's sustained recovery, was slowly but surely winning him over. One afternoon, a heated debate erupted during a symposium hosted at the Institute. Dr. Thorne was presenting preliminary findings on Aura's Embrace's molecular structure to a room full of esteemed medical professionals, many of whom were still deeply entrenched in conventional pharmaceutical models. A renowned professor from a leading medical school, a man with a reputation for staunch traditionalism, rose to challenge Dr. Thorne's presentation. Dr. Thorne, with all due respect, the professor began, his voice dripping with thinly veiled contempt, are we truly to believe that a weed, cultivated by a gardener, no less, is now the answer to complex autoimmune disorders? This smacks of sensationalism, not science. Where is the double-blind, placebo-controlled trial? Where are the years of rigorous testing? This is irresponsible and potentially dangerous, giving false hope to desperate patients. His words were a direct attack, not just on the research, but implicitly on Alara herself, a blatant attempt to discredit the Institute. The room bristled with tension. Many attendees nodded in agreement with the professor, their faces reflecting deep-seated skepticism. This was the moment of reckoning for the Institute's unconventional approach. Dr. Thorne, usually reserved, felt a surge of defensiveness. He looked at Alara, who was sitting quietly in the front row, her face calm but resolute. He knew the integrity of her work, the undeniable evidence he had personally witnessed. Instead of directly countering the professor's scathing remarks, Dr. Thorne paused, took a deep breath, and turned to his uncle, Mr. Elias Thorne, who was seated beside Alara. Professor, Dr. Thorne began, his voice clear and resonant. I understand your skepticism. It is a necessary part of scientific inquiry. However, I believe we have a rather compelling case study right here in this room. He gestured towards his uncle. My uncle, Mr. Elias Thorne, was given mere hours to live by the finest medical minds in this state. He was suffering from the very condition we are discussing, and he was cured, not by traditional pharmaceuticals, but by the weed you so dismissively refer to, prepared by Miss Alara Vance. Mr. Thorne then rose, his presence commanding, his voice unwavering. Indeed, Professor, he affirmed, addressing the room with the quiet authority of a man who had faced death and found new life. I stand before you as living proof. I was a man who believed only in the quantifiable, the scientifically proven. I scoffed at anything outside that realm. Yet, when all your rigorous testing and proven science failed, it was Miss Vance's knowledge and the plant she nurtured that saved me. We are not asking you to abandon conventional medicine, Professor. We are asking you to open your minds to the possibility that knowledge exists beyond your current paradigms, that nature holds secrets we are only just beginning to rediscover. His powerful personal testimony silenced the room. The professor, visibly taken aback by the direct, unassailable evidence of Mr. Thorne's recovery, found himself momentarily without a retort. He simply coughed, adjusting his glasses, his face flushed. This incident marked a pivotal shift. While direct opposition remained, the personal testimony of Mr. Thorne, combined with Dr. Julian Thorne's growing advocacy and Alara's meticulous data, began to chip away at the walls of resistance. Dr. Thorne, now genuinely invested, decided to take a radical step. He proposed to his uncle and Alara that he would leave his prestigious university position to dedicate himself fully to the Blackwood Botanical Institute, focusing specifically on establishing rigorous clinical trials for Aura's Embrace, aiming for full FDA approval. This isn't just about curiosity anymore, Miss Vance, he told Alara in a private meeting. This is about changing medicine, and I want to be a part of it. His decision was a huge vote of confidence, lending significant scientific credibility to the institute. The Blackwood Botanical Institute for Integrative Medicine was indeed blooming. It had not only rescued Mr. Thorne, but had also begun to rescue lives, restoring hope, and challenging the very foundations of medical orthodoxy. Ilara, the quiet gardener, had cultivated more than just plants. She had cultivated a new vision for healing, and in doing so, had carved out her own undeniable place in the world of science and beyond. The future, though still fraught with challenges, shimmered with the same vibrant potential as the Aura's embrace plant itself. The success of the Blackwood Botanical Institute for Integrative Medicine was no longer a well-kept secret within Willow Creek. It had blossomed into a national conversation. News articles, initially sparked by the Boston Globe expose, now regularly featured updates on Ilara's groundbreaking research and Mr. Thorne's remarkable recovery. The narrative of the overlooked gardener using an ancient weed to cure an incurable illness resonated deeply with a public increasingly disillusioned by the limitations of conventional medicine and yearning for more holistic approaches. The Institute's website received an exponential surge in traffic. Inquiries poured in from patients around the globe, and academic institutions, initially skeptical, began extending invitations for collaborative research. Ilara Vance, once a quiet figure content with the solitude of her garden, now found herself thrust into the demanding spotlight of public acclaim and scientific scrutiny. Her days were a whirlwind of activity, balancing the delicate work of botanical research with the burgeoning responsibilities of public speaking and institutional leadership. She lectured at prestigious medical conferences, her voice, though still soft, carrying the weight of profound knowledge and first-hand experience. She presented meticulously documented data, detailing the efficacy of Aura's embrace and the rigorous scientific protocols developed by her team, now bolstered by the invaluable expertise of Dr. Julian Thorne. The shift in her demeanor was subtle but undeniable. She moved with a quiet confidence, her green eyes reflecting both the intellectual rigor of a scientist and the gentle wisdom of a healer. Dr. Julian Thorne, true to his word, had fully committed to the Institute. He immersed himself in the complexities of integrative medicine, becoming a bridge between the traditional scientific establishment and Ilara's unconventional approach. His rigorous background in microbiology lent immense credibility to the Institute's research, as he meticulously designed and oversaw clinical trials for Aura's embrace. He tirelessly published preliminary findings in peer-reviewed journals, navigating the choppy waters of scientific skepticism with a calm, data-driven approach. His reputation as a brilliant, if formerly rigid, scientist now solidified the Institute's position as a serious contender in medical innovation. The early clinical trials, though small in scale, yielded consistently promising results, showing significant improvement in patients with similar autoimmune conditions to Mr. Thorne's. The data, published with transparent methodology, couldn't be easily dismissed. This growing body of evidence, combined with compelling patient testimonials, started to create significant ripple effects across the medical landscape. However, such success rarely comes without opposition. The traditional pharmaceutical industry, a monolithic entity built on synthetic drugs and patented compounds, viewed the rise of Blackwood Botanical Institute with growing alarm. The very idea of a natural, non-patented remedy, cultivated from a common plant, posed a direct threat to their multi-billion-dollar business model. Whispers of unregulated medicine, untested remedies, and dangerous quackery began to circulate through industry publications and lobbying groups. Ilara, and by extension, the entire institute, found themselves facing a well-funded, coordinated campaign of subtle misinformation and outright resistance. One particularly venomous attack came in the form of a scathing article published in a prominent medical journal, funded by an anonymous pharmaceutical interest group. The article, authored by a discredited but well-known critic of alternative medicine, falsely claimed that Aura's embrace caused severe side effects, citing fabricated patient accounts and distorted data. It questioned Ilara's credentials, labeling her an unqualified layperson and dismissing the institute as a dangerous experiment in folk healing. The personal nature of the attack was designed to undermine Ilara's credibility and sow public distrust. The article hit the institute like a shockwave. Donors expressed concern. Some patients hesitated, and even a few junior researchers began to waver. Ilara felt the familiar sting of public humiliation, amplified by the sheer scale of the attack. For a moment, the old fear returned. The fear of being dismissed, of her life's work being reduced to a superstitious fool's folly. But this time, she wasn't alone. Mr. Thorne, now a fierce protector of Ilara and the Institute, immediately convened a crisis meeting. His eyes, though retaining their newfound warmth, hardened with the steely resolve of a seasoned businessman facing a hostile takeover. "This is not just an attack on your science, Ilara," he stated, his voice firm. "It's an attack on truth, and on the hope we offer. We will not stand for it." Dr. Julian Thorne, equally incensed, meticulously dissected the fraudulent article, exposing every falsity, every distorted claim. He worked tirelessly to prepare a point-by-point rebuttal, assembling a comprehensive dossier of their own rigorous research, positive patient outcomes, and Mr. Thorne's undeniable recovery. It was during this period of intense pressure that Ilara faced her own profound personal growth. She had always been driven by a quiet passion, but now she found an inner strength she hadn't known she possessed. She had to learn to navigate the complex world of public relations, media scrutiny, and scientific politics. She became an even more eloquent advocate, her quiet composure transforming into an unshakable conviction that resonated with many. She refused to be intimidated, refusing to allow lies to undermine the genuine good they were doing. The decisive moment came when the Institute, with Mr. Thorne's strategic guidance, orchestrated a live, nationally televised press conference. It was a bold move, exposing them to direct public scrutiny, but it was also an opportunity to control their own narrative. Ilara, dressed in her characteristic simple linen, stood at the podium, flanked by Mr. Thorne and Dr. Julian Thorne, whose very presence refuted the claims of unqualified practitioners. She spoke not just of data, but of hope. She presented compelling graphs and clinical trial results, but she also shared heartfelt testimonials from patients whose lives had been dramatically improved by Aura's embrace. Then, Mr. Thorne stepped forward, his voice clear and strong, looking directly into the cameras. He recounted his own harrowing battle with illness and his miraculous recovery, holding up a glass vial of the very extract that had saved him. "This," he declared, holding it aloft, "is not a weed. It is a testament to nature's profound healing power, unlocked by dedication and brilliant scientific inquiry." The impact was immediate and overwhelming. The visual proof of Mr. Thorne's vitality, combined with Ilara's undeniable expertise and Dr. Thorne's scientific backing, created a powerful, undeniable counter-narrative. The public overwhelmingly rallied behind the Institute. Major news outlets, seeing the shift in public opinion, began to expose the shadowy tactics of the pharmaceutical lobbying groups, turning the tide of public perception definitively in the Institute's favor. The pharmaceutical companies, facing a public backlash and increasing scrutiny, were forced to shift their tactics. Some even began to approach the Blackwood Botanical Institute, not with hostility, but with tentative proposals for collaboration. They saw the undeniable evidence, the burgeoning market, and the changing landscape of public demand. This was not a complete surrender, but a significant strategic pivot, acknowledging the burgeoning power of integrative medicine. Ilara realized that the battle was far from over. The fight for acceptance, for wider clinical adoption, for ethical practices in natural medicine, would be a long and arduous one. But she no longer felt isolated. She had Mr. Thorne, Dr. Thorne, Mrs. Agnes, and a growing network of supporters. She understood now that her work extended beyond the confines of Blackwood Manor. It was about shaping the future of healing, pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible. Her vision, once whispered in the quiet of her garden, was now echoing across the nation, inspiring hope and challenging established norms, truly setting the stage for broader horizons. The relentless pursuit of truth and healing by the Blackwood Botanical Institute for Integrative Medicine had finally culminated in a triumph that resonated far beyond the hallowed halls of Blackwood Manor. After years of rigorous clinical trials, meticulous data collection, and tireless advocacy by Alara Vance and Dr. Julian Thorne, the Food and Drug Administration (FDA) granted expedited approval for the standardized extract of Aura's Embrace for the treatment of a specific class of autoimmune disorders. This was an unprecedented victory, a monumental shift in a landscape traditionally dominated by synthetic pharmaceuticals. The news reverberated through the medical community, sparking both fervent excitement and continued, albeit diminishing, skepticism. Alara stood at the podium in a packed auditorium, not in a grand university hall, but in the newly constructed Thorne wing of the Institute, a modern addition that seamlessly blended with the manor's historic architecture. Her simple linen dress was now a recognizable symbol of her unpretentious brilliance, and her hands, still bearing the faint marks of the garden, held the future of medicine. Her voice, clear and resonant, projected confidence and a profound sense of purpose. She spoke not only of the scientific journey, but also of the patients whose lives had been irrevocably changed. She acknowledged the initial skepticism, the uphill battle, and the unwavering belief that had driven them all. Beside her, Mr. Elias Thorne beamed with a quiet pride. His transformation was complete. The once cold businessman was now a venerable patron of healing, his eyes reflecting a deep satisfaction that transcended any past financial triumph. He looked at Alara with profound gratitude and respect, knowing that she had not only saved his life but had also helped him forge a new, meaningful legacy for his family name. He had personally overseen the establishment of an endowment fund, ensuring the Institute's long-term sustainability and independence from corporate influence. Dr. Julian Thorne, now a globally recognized leader in integrative medicine, stood with his arm around his uncle, a rare smile gracing his usually serious face. He had been instrumental in translating Alara's intuitive genius into the language of conventional science, meticulously navigating the bureaucratic hurdles of FDA approval. His presence at the podium, a testament to his own intellectual flexibility and scientific integrity, cemented the Institute's credibility on the global stage. He spoke passionately about the future of medicine, where natural compounds and traditional wisdom could complement cutting-edge research. The impact of Aura's Embrace was immediate and widespread. Patients, who had exhausted all conventional options, flocked to specialized clinics now certified to administer the treatment. Success stories, once anecdotal whispers, became scientifically validated case studies, inspiring hope and encouraging further research into other botanical remedies. Pharmaceutical companies, once adversaries, now approached the Blackwood Botanical Institute with genuine interest in collaboration, seeking to license the extract or partner on new research ventures. The Institute, under Alara's visionary leadership, remained fiercely independent, prioritizing patient well-being and ethical research over pure profit. Blackwood Manor itself had become a vibrant hub of activity. The gardens, meticulously restored and expanded under Alara's direction, were not just a source of medicinal plants, but also a living laboratory and a sanctuary of tranquility. Students from around the world came to study integrative medicine, blending traditional pharmacology with the study of botany and natural healing. Conferences and workshops were regularly held, fostering a global dialogue on the future of health. The very air of the manor seemed infused with innovation and possibility. As the sun began to set on a crisp autumn evening, mirroring the golden light of the momentous day, Alara found herself walking through her original secret garden, the very spot where she had first discovered the weed that had changed everything. The Aura's Embrace plants, now cultivated in abundance within the Institute's greenhouses, still held a special place in this hidden corner, thriving wild and free. She knelt, touching a delicate leaf, a faint smile on her lips. Mrs. Agnes, her hair now entirely silver, joined her, carrying 2 cups of chamomile tea. "Look at it all, dear Alara," she murmured, gazing out at the sprawling, bustling institute, the faint sounds of researchers working late. "A proper city of healing, right here in our quiet Willow Creek." Alara nodded, her gaze sweeping over the landscape she had nurtured. "It's more than just healing, Mrs. Agnes," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet contentment. "It's about seeing what others overlook. It's about believing in potential, even when it's hidden in plain sight. And it's about giving a voice to nature, which has so much wisdom to share." Mrs. Agnes squeezed her hand. "And you, my dear," she said, her eyes twinkling. "You gave voice to all of it, from a simple gardener, to a healer, to a visionary. You found your true place." Alara smiled, her eyes reflecting the setting sun, then the enduring green of the plants around them. The journey had been long, fraught with challenges and filled with unexpected turns. She had faced skepticism, humiliation, and outright hostility. But through it all, her unwavering belief in the power of nature, her quiet determination, and her profound sense of purpose had prevailed. Blackwood Manor, once a fading relic, had become a testament to the extraordinary, a beacon of hope, and a lasting legacy built on the wisdom of a weed and the courage of a gardener. The story of Alara Vance and the institute she helped build would continue to inspire for generations to come, reminding the world that true value often lies in the most unexpected places.